One common theme in the WNBA is how poorly officiated these games can be. The lack of competence from the people wearing the striped suits. Every time I watch a WNBA game, a thought crosses my mind when it comes to the officials, and that thought is, how much money do you have on this game? What prop bet did you place prior to suiting up tonight? What's the over/under, and are you concerned with a specific outcome? The officials in the WNBA, yes, they're incompetent, yes, they're trash, but it always seems like there's some shady, they're so bad and so incompetent, it seems like there's shady business taking place behind the scenes. If the WNBA needs to investigate in anything, it's how dirty the hands are of some of the executives that own these teams. How dirty are the hands of some of these players that are in this league? Oh yeah, tonight's the night I'm just gonna go 2 for 13. Hey, it's the WNBA. I can slide into 2 for 13 and nobody will bat an eyelash. I can shoot 5 for 22 and nobody will really think twice because it happens so.
But if you really want to understand the soul of this team, look no further than Lexie Ho. She walked onto that court with 2 black eyes from a vicious collision in a previous game. Most players would have sat out, recovered, waited for the bruises to fade. Not her. She suited up. She fought through the pain. She became the living symbol of what this Fever team stood for. Battered, underestimated, but refusing to quit. That's the spirit that defined the Indiana Fever on that night. They weren't the favorites. They weren't the healthiest, but they had something the Sparks didn't. An unshakable heart. Odyssey Sims embodied that spirit. Facing her former team, she wasn't just playing basketball. She was writing her own revenge story. When the Fever needed points, she stepped up, scoring the final 5 that kept their playoff hopes alive. And then there was Aaliyah Boston, the young cornerstone, who game after game had to fight through brutal officiating. Her own coach called her the worst officiated post player in the league. But on this night, Boston didn't complain. She didn't flinch. She dominated. 22 points, a career-high 6 steals. She put the team on her back, dragging them toward victory with sheer force of will. By the final minutes, the Fever had clawed their way to a 76-75 lead. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't easy, but it was theirs. They had overcome the injuries. They had silenced the doubt. They had done everything you're supposed to do to win a basketball game. What they didn't realize was that their biggest opponent wasn't wearing a Sparks jersey. Their biggest opponent was standing a few feet away in stripes. Because in the final seconds, when the Fever had finally earned their triumph, something happened that no one could explain. Something that turned a gritty victory into a national controversy. The Fever had fought tooth and nail to get here. With just seconds left, they were clinging to a fragile 76-75 lead. The Sparks had thrown everything at them. And yet, Indiana's grit looked like it was about to be rewarded. All they had to do was hold on. Then came the moment every athlete dreams about and every fan dreads. Kelsey Mitchell, one of the league's most trusted scorers, stepped to the free throw line with 4.0 seconds remaining. 2 shots. Make them both and the game is all but sealed. Miss them and you leave the door cracked open. The arena fell silent. The ball left her hand clanked off the rim. First miss, the pressure doubled. She bounced the ball, exhaled, and let it fly again. Another miss. The Sparks were alive. Even then, the Fever had still done enough. The clock should have run out, ending the game. The Sparks had no lifeline left. But that's when the confusion and suspicion began. The referees suddenly intervened. Instead of letting the game end naturally, they awarded the Sparks a timeout and unbelievably put 0.1 seconds back on the clock. A tenth of a second. For anyone who's ever played basketball, that's not even enough time to catch the ball, let alone shoot it. It's a fragment, a blink, an impossibility. The Fever players looked around in disbelief. The bench was on edge. Fans at home were already firing off posts online. What are we watching? How is this even legal? That tiny sliver of time should have been meaningless, but it became the crack in the door the Sparks needed. Instead of a hard-earned Fever win, the final moments descended into pure chaos. The last 3.9 seconds stretched into nearly 5 minutes of real time as the officials seemed determined to engineer a miracle for Los Angeles. Every whistle, every reset, every decision felt like one more step away from fairness. And with each second that dragged on, the tension in the arena turned from excitement to suspicion. Something didn't feel right. This wasn't normal. This wasn't basketball. And sitting on the sideline, unable to play, but very much alive in the moment, Caitlin Clark could no longer contain her fury. What should have been a clean ending to a hard-fought game turned into a circus. The kind of chaos that makes fans shake their heads, players lose their cool, and everyone watching at home wonder if they were witnessing a setup. With 0.1 seconds suddenly put back on the clock, the referees suddenly had control of the game's destiny. And instead of letting the Fever's grit pay off, they dragged the finish into a bizarre marathon of stoppages, reviews, and second chances for the Sparks. The final 3.9 seconds, less than the time it takes to sip from a water bottle, stretched into nearly 5 agonizing minutes of real time. Whistles blew. Players shuffled around in confusion. The officials conferred again and again as if searching for a way, anyway, to hand Los Angeles another shot. For the Fever, the frustration was unbearable. They had already beaten the odds, overcoming injuries, hostile crowd energy, and the weight of playoff pressure. And now their biggest obstacle wasn't the Sparks at all. It was the people in stripes. Caitlin Clark, sitting on the bench in street clothes, became the emotional epicenter of the drama. She wasn't even playing, but the cameras couldn't look away from her face. Her face said it all. Wide-eyed disbelief, shaking her head, shouting at the refs, throwing her hands up in sheer outrage. This wasn't a player sulking over a foul call. This was the most important figure in the WNBA watching the credibility of the league unravel right in front of her. And the internet noticed immediately. Clips of Clark erupted across social media. Fans posted side-by-side images of her furious reaction with captions like, "We all felt like Caitlin last night." Even neutral observers were baffled, asking how a game could be extended, twisted, and stretched into something that looked more like theater than competition. For the Sparks, it felt like lifelines were being tossed their way again and again. For the Fever, it felt like theft in broad daylight. Every call, every delay, every adjustment by the referees chipped away at the trust fans had in the game. And by the time the final buzzer finally sounded, the sense of injustice was overwhelming. The truth is, Clark's eruption didn't come out of nowhere. It wasn't just about one whistle or one strange replay. This was the breaking point of something that had been simmering for weeks, even months. A pattern of questionable officiating, of players begging for fairness and getting ignored. And now on the biggest stage, the frustration could no longer be contained. But to understand why Clark lost it, why the Fever bench was seething, you have to step back and look at the bigger picture. Because this wasn't just one ugly night. It was part of a disturbing pattern. What happened in Los Angeles wasn't an isolated meltdown. It wasn't one bad game for the referees. For the Indiana Fever, this was just the latest chapter in a story they'd been living all season long. A story of silence, fines, and double standards. Coach Stephanie White has been carrying this fight by herself for months. She's spoken up about the officiating, about the way her players are treated compared to the league's bigger market stars. And every single time she's raised her voice, the league's response has been the same. Fine her, shut her down, and sweep it under the rug.